Join ForumIAS Academy, trusted by hundreds of toppers, including IAS Rank 1 𝐂𝐡𝐚𝐧𝐧𝐞𝐥 Sharma.
Hi, my name is Krishnan. I'll be doing the Hindi news analysis for the day. These are the 5 articles that are taken up for discussion, and towards the end we'll analyze previous year questions. So the first article for the day is about fiscal health of states. So how states are managing their finances. We'll have a look at it. So in India, what states are doing, they mobilize 1/3 of the total revenue, and they spend 60% of it, and their borrowing also is very high. That is, their borrowing is close to 40%. So what they're next telling, given the size of the fiscal operation of states, we need to understand up-to-date understanding of their finances, so that we can draw evidences based on inference on the fiscal situation of the country. So in short, what are we going to do? We are going to do an analysis on the emerging fiscal situation of the states by going through key data on state finances from their individual state budgets. So here we'll see how there is fiscal imbalance and how they are consolidating it. So now we have completed the first quarter of fiscal year, right? So what we get to see is there is increase in government deficit and debt. So during COVID-19, there was increase in government deficit and debt, right? Now it has begun to recede. So after COVID, it is coming down. And post-pandemic, there are a lot of fiscal corrections also at the union and state levels. So at the union level, what has happened? Fiscal deficit has decreased from 9.1, it has come down to 5.9. And at the state level also, fiscal deficit was 4.1%. During 2021, it was 4.1. Now it has come down to 3.24. And for major states, it is going to come much more down. It's going to come down to 2.9. So what do we infer from this? So the author is telling this sharp reduction in fiscal deficit suggests that we cannot have an impressionistic view of the fiscal situation of the country, especially on the finances of the state. So why he is telling this is because there is absence of aggregation of individual state budget data. So because of this, a consolidated view of general government finances is not readily available. So how we are getting this data? This data becomes available only after the publication of Reserve Bank of India's annual study on state finances. And aggregating fiscal data from individual state budgets is rigorous and time consuming. So what RBI is doing, they're publishing it only during the second half of the fiscal year. So in this article, we are analyzing whatever we are going to analyze. It is based on the data collated from individual budget of 17 major states. So why it is very necessary? Because these 17 states are only responsible for 90% of the combined spending of all states. So the physical issues that are coming out of these states' budgets are representative of the entire country's states' problems. So why we have to study is, during analysis we have found out that these states have managed to contain their fiscal deficits. So their fiscal consolidation is good. So we are going to study about them. So first, what do we find? States in aggregate managed to be fiscally prudent because during COVID-19 their revenues went down. So in spite of this, they were fiscally prudent. And emergency provision for health spending during COVID-19 was not easy, and union and state level, state governments, the coordination was good. And the third what happened was states were able to reprioritize their expenditure, and they were able to contain their fiscal deficit. Next, what happened? There is reduction in fiscal deficit. How this was done? There was a combination of expenditure reducing, improved GST collection, and higher tax devolution. So the center devolved the tax to states. How were they able to do it? Because even they got good GST revenue, so they were able to give it to the states. And non-GST revenues are also showing up because most of the pandemic effects are now over. So, but what are the challenges we have? There are significant challenges that need correction in the short to medium time frame. What is the most important out of it? It is the revenue deficit of states. So what we get to know is there is a reduction of fiscal deficit for states, but this is not accompanied by reduction in revenue deficit. So right now, 2023 to 2024, what we are finding is out of 17 major states, 13 states have deficit in revenue account. So out of these 13 states, fiscal deficits of 7 states are primarily driven by revenue deficit. What are these states? Andhra Pradesh, Haryana, Kerala, Punjab, Rajasthan, Tamil Nadu and West Bengal. Their revenue deficit is very bad, and they also have a very large debt to gross state domestic production ratios. So, but the author is telling, see, these people are having revenue deficit, but just this deficit cannot be considered as a sign of fiscal profligacy. What is profligacy? Not maintaining it properly, or fiscal is going wrong. So that we cannot tell. He's telling, see, because of COVID-19, there was pressure on revenue expenditure also. So that also we can accept. But he's telling we have to look at it more in a more detailed and careful analysis. Why this rise in revenue deficit in states happening. So it's telling, see, revenue deficit is increasing, right? Because we'll have to have a look at it. Because if revenue deficit is driving fiscal imbalance, it will have a long-term fiscal implication. So it's telling right now itself we'll have to correct this imbalance in the revenue account. So what are the 7 states and what are the specific shares of revenue deficit in fiscal deficit? So Andhra Pradesh has 40%, Haryana 50, Kerala 60, Punjab 70, Rajasthan 40 and Tamil Nadu 40 and West Bengal 47. So these are the states with very high amount of revenue deficit in their fiscal deficit. So what is the share of their revenue deficit in fiscal deficit? It is going to be 27. So this was identified by successive finance commission. Since 12th finance commission, Kerala, Punjab and West Bengal are fiscally stressed states. So from 3, this number of states that are physically stressed have gone to 7. So if fiscal deficit is increasing, what will it mean for general government macroeconomic stability? So how is macroeconomic stability going with all this revenue deficit increasing? We'll have to have a look at the numbers. So fiscal deficit of these states is 3.17% of GSDP, and all state average for the same is 2.9. And their combined revenue deficit is 2.15% of GSDP, and all the state revenue deficit is just 0.78%. And their combined debt ratio is higher than the Finance Commission recommended debt ratio for all states for the year 23-24. So what happens? But at the same time, these states together contribute around 40% of India's GDP. So if you want state-specific growth, and if it should be higher, fiscal deficit of state finances also is very critical. So we should focus on their fiscal health, because some of these states have also been big drivers of public capital expenditure, and they have favored investor destination of private investors. So what can we do to reduce revenue deficit? So the author here is giving a framework. So it's telling, on the question of revenue deficit, you take a long-term view. So if you take the data for the last 20 years, revenue deficit has almost disappeared from state budgets before COVID-19. And states in fact were actually generating revenue surpluses, and only because of COVID-19 revenue deficit came again. So what the author is telling, so there is re-emergence of revenue deficit, and we should give proper attention to it, and we have to come up with a framework so that we deal with it properly. So here the author is giving few measures that can be considered. So first thing what is telling, interest-free loans to state by union government. So it's telling, link this to reduction of revenue deficit. So what will this do? This will eliminate the possibility of a substitution of states' own capital spending, and it will also prevent the diversion of borrowed resources to finance revenue expenditure. So this is actually a good idea. And next what he's telling is define a time path for revenue deficit reduction, and you give them a proper credible fiscal adjustment plan. So this would help restore fiscal balance and improve the quality of expenditure. Next, what is telling, a forward-looking performance incentive grants could also be considered for reduction of revenue deficit. So in this context, what can we do? Finance Commission has given different approaches in the earlier Finance Commission itself. So that can be considered to decide the framework of the incentive structure. So in conclusion, what we can tell, we need to get the focus back on the management of revenue deficit. So for that, we'll have to take a macro view only. So only if you see it from a macro view, you can come up with a plan to manage this revenue deficit. Now let us move on to the next article. This article is about how antibiotics can save life, and there are important antibiotics that have not been granted license yet. So we'll see about these antibiotics. So you all know of late there are a lot of drug resistant infections because bacteria is increasingly becoming drug resistant. So in this article, the author is asking for emergency use authorization. That is, you don't have to go through full legal certification, legal licensing for the antibiotics to be used. So that is called emergency use authorization. So here the author is asking for essential antibiotics should be should be given emergency use authorization. Why is he telling this? Because what happened recently in Hyderabad, a 18-year-old patient was having a problem. So few bacteria were attacking his T cell. He had T cell leukemia. What happened? He was given antibiotics, but it didn't work. And the bacteria Pseudomonas aeruginosa is drug resistant. So whatever antibiotics was given, it didn't work on him. So what is this strain Pseudomonas aeruginosa? It is high resistant to multiple antibiotics. So this left the medical team with limited and often ineffective treatment options. So despite the doctors using a lot of antibiotics, the patient's condition deteriorated rapidly, and he had a lot of fever spikes, and his lungs had a lot of problem, and even the bacteria was eating up the patient's face. So, and time was running out, and his life hung in the balance. So finally, what the doctors did, the doctors turned to a very promising antibiotic called cefepime and cidobactam. So this is developed by Indian researchers, and this antibiotic combines two active components to combat drug-resistant gram-negative pathogens, including Pseudomonas aeruginosa. So this is undergoing phase 3 trials internationally, but this Indian drug-resistant antibiotic has shown remarkable potential. So he was given a compassionate use protocol. So it can be used on him, and necessary approvals were given, and finally the patient received a cefepime and cidobactam, and miraculously there was improvement, and his fever subsided, blood cultures turned negative, and even the need for oxygen diminished, and slowly but steadily his strength returned, and he was fine. So why the author is telling this case is this case is a very important case because it tells how urgent is the need for granting EUA for antibiotics, which is currently in phase 3. So it's telling the survival of this patient is a reminder of getting timely access to effective antibiotics. So there's a dire situation that is going on because infection specialists, intensivists, oncologists, and doctors treating severe infection in critically ill and immunocompromised patients are confronted with this grave reality. So what is that grave reality? Antibiotics have become, the antibiotics are not working because bacteria have become drug resistant. So a lot of people are dying because antibiotics have lost their effectiveness due to rising resistance. So this has become a reality throughout India, and each year millions of people are dying because of non-availability of antibiotics that can take on these drug-resistant bacteria. So the doctors also facing a lot of challenges, and what they are telling is they are navigating through a shrinking arsenal of effective antibiotics. So shrinking arsenal of effective antibiotics means not much antibiotics are available, and this is leaving them with limited choices. And because of that, what they are doing, they're resorting to suboptimal treatments. So because of this optimal treatment and using less effective antibiotics, what is happening? Side effects are coming and cure is also not happening. So the doctors are running constantly against trying to stay one step ahead of the mutating bacteria. This is increasing their pressure, but at the same time they're also helpless. So what India has done as a nation, it has demonstrated remarkable progress in granting emergency use authorization for COVID-19 vaccine. So the author is telling the government should also extend the same level of urgency and commitment and save the lives of patients who might otherwise die to all these drug-resistant bacteria. So, but on the other hand, one more problem is there, because in our country there are a lot of antibiotics that are licensed, which are based on small clinical studies, and their benefits are questionable. But still, on the other hand, we must also recognize that we truly need a powerful weapon to fight against drug-resistant infections. So we need to get antibiotics that have been thoroughly evaluated and proven to be effective. So then only we can license them. So it's telling this cefepime or 𝐧𝐶𝐵actam is a shining example for India's scientific prowess. Currently internationally it is going as the phase 3 trials, and it has demonstrated its potential to save lives. So what the government should do, the author is telling the government should recognize the importance of cefepime and 𝐧𝐶𝐵actam, and it should expedite its early use authorization. So is telling this will not only save lives within our borders, but it will save a lot of people around the globe. And one more antibiotic is there that is made by Japan, cefiderocol. So this is a licensed antibiotic in several countries. This is developed by a Japanese company, and even this has demonstrated its efficacy against drug-resistant infections. So even this is not available in our country. So the author is telling in our country there are a lot of patients who need access to this life-saving antibiotic. So there's a collective decisions made by a team of experienced doctors, including infectious experts, should be made mandatory before initiating the use. So antibiotics, people are using it. They can go to a pharmacy and get it, or they're getting it by other means and they're just using it. So that is the problem. So the author is telling you might get expert advice before you're using it. So if you do this, if you have experts sign mandatory, what will happen? This will ensure that the powerful antibiotics are administered to patients who will benefit the most, and at the same time this will also minimize the risk, misuse or overuse. So finally telling, we are asking the authorities to recognize the urgent need for action and acknowledge the immense potential of this life-saving antibiotics. So finally telling, please grant EUA for cefepime 𝐧𝐶𝐵actam, which is an Indian innovation, and cefiderocol, this is a globally recognized antibiotic which is not available in India. So it's asking the government to include them in EUA. So this will not only empower doctors, but it will give hope and confidence to patients and their families. So we know India as a nation is known for its scientific achievements. So finally we have the opportunity to make a substantial impact not only within our country, but in the world stage also. Now let us move on to the next topic. This topic is about how the center and states should manage food grains. This is being written in the background of Karnataka's Annabhagya scheme. We'll analyze what it is. So the Karnataka government has decided to convert the Annabhagya scheme to a direct benefit transfer temporarily, because why? Because there are a few problems. Let us analyze what it is. So first of all, what does the Annabhagya scheme promise to give? It gives the provision of 5 kg of free rice per person per month to 4.42 crore beneficiaries, and within that there are 45 lakh Antyodaya Anna Yojana card holders, 3.5 crore priority card holders, and 39 lakh card holders belonging to Karnataka's category of priority household card holders. So all this was being done in addition to regular entitlements under the Beneficiaries of National Food Security Act. So to do this, the state would have required around 2.3 lakh metric tons of rice every month. So it went and asked the Food Corporation of India, and Food Corporation of India said on June 12, will supply the quantity under open market sales scheme domestic. So what is open market sales scheme? Other than whatever is being sold to the states, Food Corporation of India will have the remaining surplus food, that they will sell in open market, which private players will buy. So that is only the open market sales scheme domestic. But what happened? This scheme, which was launched on July 1, ran into serious problem because the Union Food Ministry said will not continue the sale of rice and wheat under open market sales scheme. So, but the Karnataka government was shocked because they thought they'll use this route, that is the open market route, to implement the scheme. So, though this open market scheme is meant for sale of surplus stocks of wheat and rice at predetermined prices, they'll do this through e-auctions in the open market. Why they do this? Because they want to improve the supply of food grains and control the price level also. And generally, states are allowed to purchase the surplus stock without e-auctions. So, but in the open market scheme, now what will happen? They'll accommodate small and marginal buyers and traders because they will bid in small ranges, like from 10 to 100 metric tons. They will bid. But now the central government is telling they are not going to sell rice through OMSS. So this has shocked states like Karnataka. This is a sudden decision, and at the same time, Karnataka is going to start its scheme, and they will not be getting rice also. So what experts are saying, this is a communication gap between Union Food Ministry and Food Corporation of India. So what are the suggestions people are giving? I mean, experts are giving to Karnataka. They are telling, instead of rice and wheat, you give ragi and jowar, which is grown in Karnataka itself, because this will help them meet the demand. And so supply problems and all those things will also not be there. So why did the center do this? Because they had their own compulsions, because the quarterly stock position of rice and wheat, right, in the central pool was lowest in the last 3 years. So it is higher than the prescribed limit only, but it was lowest in the 3 years. And the center was scared to give food grains because there is uncertainty regarding southwest monsoon, and people are and experts are telling there might be an adverse monsoon, and this might impact the production of food grains. So the center took this decision to restrict the supply. So all this only shows there should be a lot of consultation between center and states. And besides, we should also check if it is feasible to rely on private traders to bring down the prices for those not covered under NFSA. Because you see, there is one difference between the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana and this Anna Bhagya scheme. In the Garib Anna Kalyan Yojana, what the scheme will provide 5 kg of free food grains per person per month from the center pool to Antyodaya Anna Yojana and priority household holders all over India. So what has this taught the states? This episode has told the states that they should have their own mechanisms in place before launching any scheme. So even if there is no issues between central and Karnataka government, the sustainability of Anna Bhagya scheme was questionable, because supply through open market sales scheme would not have been sufficient, because on an average about 16 lakh tons were drawn in total by all the players, and the highest quantity of about 25 lakh tons was drawn in 2020-21. So Karnataka would have needed about 27.5 lakh tons annually, about 1.5 lakh tons higher than the state's allocation under NFSA. So states must consider the macro picture to assign the practicality of their schemes. And the center indeed had a reason to worry, because if other states also promise a scheme of its own in the food sector, based on the expectation, the central government and FCI will come in without any regarding for the emerging grades. So other states also, if they do it in the long term, everything will be unsustainable. So that is why center did not agree to it. So finally, what they are telling, states should exercise discipline, and all these trends should not go unchecked, because the country should have a comfortable stock, not just surplus, they should have comfortable stock. So problem should not just be about availability but of the cost also, because FCI reportedly agreed to sell surplus grains to Karnataka at rupees 36 per kg, and the required quantity was obtained at this cost. The monthly outgo for Karnataka would have been 840 crores. So they're telling don't use this as an instrument of politics, because there is no crisis as of now on the food grain front. But the present situation should serve as a lesson to all political players to exercise moderation while making electoral promises, because all these issues are based on food security of the nation, right? So they should stop seeing food grains as an instrument of politics, and they should take an objective appraisal of programs such as Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana or Anna Bhagya. Now let us move on to the next article. This article is about called leptospirosis. So this has emerged as an important infectious disease in the world today. It is a fatal zoonotic bacterial disease. So what is zoonotic? It can transfer from animals to humans, and it tends to have large outbreaks after heavy rainfall or flooding. So this disease is prevalent in warm, humid countries in both urban and rural areas, and it affects close to 1 million people every year, and it kills 60,000 people. So the burden of leptospirosis is expected to increase in the future as urban poor population in tropical countries increase, and sanitary infrastructure is also not good. So in India, thousands of people are affected by leptospirosis every year, and the numbers at the global and regional levels aren't exact because of misdiagnosis. Symptoms are also similar to dengue, malaria, and hepatitis, and there is very limited access to reliable diagnostics, and there's lack of awareness among physicians, and there's even lack of environmental surveillance. And within India, studies have found that leptospirosis is more common in the south, but experts are telling this could be due to the region's better healthcare and thus better disease detection. So what is the cause of the disease? It's caused by a bacterium called Leptospira interrogans or Leptospira. It is a contagious disease in animals, but is occasionally transmitted to humans in certain environmental conditions. So the carriers of the disease can be either wild or domestic animals, including rodents, cattle, pigs, and dogs. The cycle of disease transmission begins with shedding of Leptospira, usually in the urine of infected animals. According to the US Center for Disease Control and Prevention, infected animals can continue to excrete the bacteria into their surroundings for few months. In some cases, it could go up to years. So who are the people at risk? The people who directly come in contact with this urine or indirectly through the soil and water that contain Leptospira bacteria are at risk. And a person is more likely to contract if they have cuts or abrasions on their skin. And this disease is also considered an occupational hazard for people working in agricultural settings with animals or in sanitary services, because this will bring them in contact with contaminated water. Recreational activities in contaminated lakes and rivers are also reported to increase the risk of leptospirosis. So what are the symptoms? It could range from mild flu-like illness to being life-threatening. It can affect many organs, reflecting the systematic nature of the disease. This is why the signs and symptoms of leptospirosis are often mistaken for other diseases. For example, in milder cases, patients could experience a sudden onset of fever, chills, and headache, or sometimes there are no symptoms at all. But in severe cases, the disease can be characterized by dysfunction of multiple organs, including liver, kidney, lungs, and brain. Animals exhibit variety of clinical symptoms and indications. In cattle and pig, the disease can potentially cause reproductive failure, stillbirths, and weak calves or piglets. Dogs experience a range of symptoms, including fever, jaundice, vomiting, diarrhea, and renal failure. Sometimes they die also. So, what are the misconceptions about leptospirosis? It requires adequate health education, community health empowerment, and preventive habits. The disease is called Ilijwara in Canada or Elipani in Malayalam, both meaning rat fever. This usage has led to the belief that rats are the sole cause for the disease, which is not true. The spectrum of reservoir can be found in pigs, cattle, water buffaloes, goats, dogs, horses, and sheep. And seasonal patterns such as the onset of monsoon can also potentially facilitate the disease incidence and transmission. So ambient air that is more humid can help the pathogenic leptospira survive longer in the environment. Thus, it increases the risk of disease exposure in the community. And the incidence is linked to extreme weather events like floods and hurricanes, poor waste management, high density of stray animals, faulty drainage system, and unhygienic sanitation failures are major drivers of disease in urban areas. In rural parts, there are contaminated paddy fields, dirty livestock shelters, and poor water quality and sanitation. Despite the complexity, the use of rat fever as a colloquial term for leptospirosis undermines a more holistic understanding of the disease causes. So, if you have to protect people, we must use the correct terms, study the ecology properly, study the ecology of the disease, and use the findings to inform healthcare policy, improve health literacy, and engage with people's concerns. So, we'll see how we can prevent leptospirosis. Leptospirosis can benefit from One Health approach. So this is an interdisciplinary approach that recognizes the interconnection between health of humans, animals, plants, and the shared environment. So people who frequently contact with animals or their urine should exercise particular cautions, such as by wearing personal protective equipment like gloves and boots. And the same goes for workers in flooded fields, because there's a chance for being exposed to contaminated water. They should take care if they have cuts or abrasion, and they can also prevent animals from getting infected. So this will reduce the risk of leptospirosis spreading and to limit farmers' economic losses. So this in turn requires sanitary animal keeping condition, which is also desirable to improve the animal's health and to prevent the spread of many diseases. So given the spike in leptospirosis during monsoon, it is best to take precautions including washing arms, legs with antiseptic liquid after handling animal waste and after working in water. In total, finally, we can say One Health in mind. Public health public health professionals must work closely with animal husbandry department to familiarize people about the dangers of leptospirosis, and they should create measures that work for the health of both people and animals. So that's how we put an end to this disease. So monsoon is going to start, so that is why experts are warning us before itself. Now let us move on to the next topic. This topic is about the connection between anemia and maternal health. Now let us see what researchers about this topic. So there was a trial called Women 2. So this was a research which got published in the Lancet. So it talked about maternal anemia and the risk of postpartum hemorrhage, a cohort analysis of data from the Women 2 trial. So of late, anemia has been in the news in India because the government is proposing to remove a question on it from the NFHS, and instead they are going to do a more elaborate test to determine hemoglobin levels in the blood as part of diet and biomarker survey. So a paper recommending that normative values for hemoglobin must be lowered in India based on a small study has also come in for criticism. So what this article argues is they are telling there was a study published recently in the Lancet to inform their rules on measuring anemia, handling it, and how to make sure the interventions are sensible and far-reaching. So what is the link between anemia and pregnancy? Anemia has a very strong link with postpartum hemorrhage, that is the excessive vaginal bleeding after delivery, and it can even lead to death. As per the study, what they found is like more than 500 million women of reproductive age are anemic worldwide. So every year there are about 70,000 women who give birth die from postpartum hemorrhage, and almost all of them come from low and middle income countries. Well, this is a known risk of anemia. Researchers are also deciding on what is the association between anemia and postpartum hemorrhage. So the trial had close to 10,000 women with anemia and who gave birth vaginally in Pakistan, Nigeria, Tanzania, and Zambia, where these are countries where anemia and pregnancy women were common, and this was established by other trials as well. So they examined the continuous association between hemoglobin levels being down and the risk of postpartum hemorrhage in a large cohort of women from low and middle income countries. So the advantage of examining anemia as a continuous variable, the author suggested that there's a monotonic biological gradient, which is telling there's a causal relationship between these two things, blood loss and shock, because the mean age of women from all these countries was just over 27 years. And there was a clear evidence from the study that lower hemoglobin values are a direct relationship with volume of blood loss and clinical postpartum hemorrhage. And what happens now, anemia reportedly, it reduces the oxygen carrying capacity of blood, and therefore women with anemia cannot tolerate the same value of bleeding as healthy women do. and become shocked even after a very small volume of blood loss. And they told, given the lack of established definition of postpartum hemorrhage in women with anemia, so they examined different definitions of postpartum hemorrhage in terms of their specificity, so that they could establish the why there is bleeding and their association with fatigue, physical endurance, and breathlessness. So they estimated a blood loss post delivery was 301 milliliter for 3.2% women with, and women with moderate anemia had 340 milliliter for 1,770 women with severe anemia. So the risk of clinical postmortem was postpartum hemorrhage was 6.2% in women with moderate anemia, and it's 11.2% with women with severe anemia. And 14 women died, and 68 either died or had a near miss. And severe anemia was associated with 7 times higher odds of death or near miss than was moderate anemia. And researchers further said that 10 gram per liter reduction in pre-birth hemoglobin increased the odds of clinical postpartum hemorrhage. And the authors went on to recommend that attention should be given to prevention and treatment of anemia in women once they hit the reproductive age. So how do you prevent anemia? What is the Indian government is doing? They're giving weekly iron and folic acid supplement to both boys and girls, because there's a huge anemia crisis going on in India, and the claim to a barely acceptable hemoglobin content of 12 for women seems very steep, given the nutrition status of these children, primarily in rural areas where quality and quantity of what they eat is less than ideal and is only exacerbated by malabsorption. So the task has already been cut out for Indian public health program. Health managers are aware of the risks of anemia and they even know how to handle it. But however, this rising level of anemia in the country is a source of concern, and mandates that any project to bring down anemia in the country must be on a mission mode. And the solution is not to bring down the gold standard laboratory. They're saying don't just stay in the laboratory meaning of it. You work on all the schemes, you give them better food. So this is how you tackle anemia. So while the argument to detach anemia from NFHS is that this DAB would be undertaking a more elaborate blood draw to measure hemoglobin levels accurately, the argument again, it also suggests that the measure may not be feasible for a large group of people who may say okay to a capillary blood draw, that is a finger prick, but they might get scared at a venous that is getting blood through veins. So any public outreach program should be mindful of the cultural, social realities and have a sense of the attitudes of these people they are targeting. So if these factors are not seen into a public health program, the outcome may be very far from what was thought or planned. So this is what experts are telling. So now let us move on to the previous year question. Yoga Vasistha was translated into Persian by Nizamuddin Panipati during the reign of Akbar. This was actually a difficult question. So, which of the following statement represent teaching of Ramanuja? It's a very easy question. The best means of salvation was devotion. This question was about Somnath Temple. Somnath Temple is one of the Jyotirlinga shrines. The description of Somnath Temple was given by Albiruni, and Prana Pratishtha was done by Vallabha Patel, not President Radhakrishnan. So the answer is A1 and 2. So Sangam literature in ancient South India. Which of the following is true? The social classification of Varna was known to Sangam poets. So that's all for today. You can follow us on YouTube, Instagram, Telegram, and Facebook. Thanks for joining in. We'll see you again tomorrow.